It's been a long time since I've done a video talking about Brett Favre. And ironically, the reason I'm talking about him today is the same reason why I talked about him the last time I spoke on him. And that is about him being, in my opinion, a welfare king. Now, we know why they're not going to talk about Brett Favre for a couple of reasons. One is the obvious. He's a PC man. Two, he was a successful NFL player. And three, he has a lot of money. So you're questioning, why would he be on welfare? Honestly, if you have to ask yourself this question, I'm going to wonder if you're asking it in a rhetorical way or you're just that clueless. A lot of the people that are on welfare are usually people who don't need it. And a lot of the people that's on welfare are those who look like him. This guy has racked up millions of dollars playing in the NFL and getting all kinds of endorsement and brand deals in the vast career that he's had. And he still wants more, but he's taking it away from the people that need it the most. And what makes this even crazier is that he's taking it from a state that literally is getting drained of its money and resources every single day, and that state being Mississippi. Now, before I actually really get into the story itself, in case y'all are unaware, Jackson, Mississippi, which houses the vast majority of black people, it's a huge black populace in Jackson, Mississippi, is facing the same crisis that Flint, Michigan was facing a few years ago, and as far as I'm concerned, still facing today. And that's their water. I have the strongest inkling that they're trying to do to the people of Jackson what they did to the people of Flint. And that's to get them up out of there. Meanwhile, this guy who has millions of dollars in the bank already is racking in more money because of him abusing the welfare system. But I bet you many are not going to talk about that because they have to leave the welfare queens and kings to black people as far as who consumes it the most. Now, here's the craziest part. Mississippi is the nation's poorest state. Out of all 50 states, Mississippi is the poorest. But they used welfare money to pay Brett Favre for speeches he never made. They said $70 million in federal welfare funds went to Brett Favre, a volleyball complex and a former pro wrestler, in a scandal that has rocked Mississippi. Brett Favre earned nearly $140 million as a star NFL quarterback over 2 decades and millions more in product and endorsements. So he got double in his NFL career just as a quarterback, opposed to what he has received on top of the welfare money that he should not have received. But that didn't stop the state of Mississippi from paying Brett Favre $1.1 million in 2017 and 2018 to make motivational speeches out of federal welfare funds intended for needy families. The Mississippi state auditor said Favre never gave the speeches and demanded the money back with interest. So he was just basically stealing the money. This man was paid over $1 million to give speeches that he never gave. He just pocketed the money. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Brett Favre has some anti-black sentiments about himself. I could have sworn I remember him saying some things, some sideways things, or some things that deem a side eye from black people about black people in the past. Someone let me know down in the chat. Favre has repaid the fees, although not the $228,000 in interest the auditor also demanded, but the revelation by the auditor that $70 million in TANF welfare funds was doled out to a multimillionaire athlete, a professional wrestler, a horse farm, and a volleyball complex are at the heart of a scandal that has rocked the nation's poorest state, sparking parallel state and federal criminal investigations that have led to charges and guilty pleas involving some of the key players. Now, if you listen to all the entities that got money, they don't need it. The money was supposed to go to families, not an athlete, not a wrestler, not a sports complex or a or a horse farm, places that can rack in a lot of money, whether it's 6 figures or 7 figures. Favre hasn't been accused of a crime or charge, and he declined an interview. His lawyer, Bud Holmes, said he did nothing wrong and never understood he was paid with money intended to help poor children. Holmes acknowledged that the FBI had questioned Favre in the case, a fact that hasn't previously been reported. I feel like that is cap all the way. You mean to tell me you're just accepting money from anywhere and you're not questioning where it came from? Okay, if you say so. The saga, which has been boiling at a low grade for 2.5 years, of course, drew new attention in July when the state welfare agency fired a lawyer who had been hired to claw back some of the money just after he issued a subpoena seeking more information about the roles of Favre and the former governor Phil Bryant, a Republican. The current governor, Republican Tate Reeves, acknowledged playing a role in the decision to sack Brad Pigott, accusing the Bill Clinton appointed former U.S. attorney of having a political agenda. But the state official who first uncovered the misspending and fraud, auditor Shad White, is a Republican. Now, notice the thing there. That's one thing about Republican ran states. Of course, the blue states have their issues as well, but the Republican ran states have some of the most poorest, not only some of the poorest states, but they also have they're ranked very low on education. Like, they rank very low in the education department across the board, whether it's public, private, charter school. And that's something they don't like to talk about. Now, Mississippi is a red state. And they have all of this going on right now that they're trying their best to keep under wraps. But see, the thing that's working against them is the fact that Brett Favre is a public figure. It's not like he's some nobody that no one knows about. So with just his name attached alone to this scandal, it's going to draw eyes. It's going to draw attention, probably unwanted attention on their end, but attention nonetheless. So they really can't escape it. If Brett Favre was just some random, then this probably would be a non-story, because notice they said a pro wrestler, but we don't know who the wrestler is. I don't know if this wrestler worked with or for the WWE. Then they said a volleyball complex. They didn't mention the name of it, and a horse farm, even though they don't mention who owns the farm. But they know who Brett Favre is. So in order to push this story, this non-story, to be a story, they had to put him in the forefront of it. In his first television interview since he was fired, Pigott said his only agenda was to get at the truth and to recoup U.S. taxpayer funds sent to Mississippi that he says were, quote unquote, squandered. The notion of tens of millions of dollars that was intended by the country to go to the alleviation of poverty and to see it going toward very different purposes was appalling to many of us, he said. Mr. Favre was a very great quarterback, but having been a great NFL quarterback, he is not well acquainted with poverty. Pigott, who before he was fired, sued on behalf of Mississippi's welfare agency, Namie Favre and 37 other grant recipients, laid ultimate blame at the feet of top Mississippi politicians, including Bryant. Governor Bryant gave tens of millions of dollars of this TANF welfare money to a nonprofit led by a person who he knew well and who had more connections with his political party than with the good people in Mississippi who have the heart and the skills to actually get people out of poverty or prevent teenage pregnancies. In an interview with the website Mississippi Today, Bryant said he never knew the grants came from the welfare money. His lawyer didn't respond to requests for comment. See how they all now they throwing dirt in each other under the bus, and people love to say that that PC doesn't do this like black people do this. I keep telling people, y'all need to look at that political arena. That's where most of the mudslinging occurs at, and that what I just read is the definition of mudslinging right there. When stuff gets down, when they say the chips are down and it gets rough and your back's against the wall, what are you going to do? Exactly what this guy's doing right now. The person in charge of the nonprofit group Pigott was referring to is Nancy New, a close friend of Bryant's wife. New and her son had pled guilty to state and federal charges and agreed to cooperate. New, a key player in doling out the money, said in a court document that Bryant was among those involved in directing the transactions. Her lawyer declined to comment. The former head of state welfare agency John Davis has pled not guilty to state charges of bribery and conspiracy, and law enforcement officials say the investigations continue. Favre defended himself in a series of tweets last year against allegations from White, the state auditor, that he accepted state money for speeches that he never intended to give. I would never knowingly take funds meant to help our neighbors in need, but for Shad White to continue to push out this lie that the money was for no-show events is something I cannot stay silent about. The speeches aren't the only welfare grants tied to Favre. Text messages obtained by Mississippi Today and authenticated by Piggott show that Favre sought a $3.2 million grant for a drug company in which he was a shareholder, and a $5 million award that built a volleyball arena at the University of Southern Mississippi, where his daughter played the sport and where he played football. Favre's lawyers declined to comment. I wonder if that was the volleyball complex that they were talking about. The drug company Pravakis was touting treatments to mitigate the effects of concussions, although none were approved by the Food and Drug Administration. In some texts, Favre suggested awarding shares in the drug company to Bryant while he was governor. Don't know if legal or not, but we need to cut him in, Favre texted the company official in November 2018, referring to Bryant. Following up 3 days later, Favre wrote, also, if legal, I'll give some of my shares to the governor. Now listen to how he said that. He says, don't know if legal or not, but we need to cut him in. So my thing to Brett Favre is, if it wasn't legal, and it doesn't sound like it could be, you were going to cut him in regardless. See, Brett Favre tried to weasel his way out of one scenario, but the more they kept digging, another scenario is coming right around the corner to come and bite him in the butt. And that volleyball thing, I think that was the complex. So that means there's some more stuff tied to Brett Favre than just him getting money just because. But if that volleyball complex where his daughter plays at is the one that they're talking about that's got money too, that means he's getting money there as well. Bryant has said he never would have accepted such an offer. All of it remains quite a mystery, Piggott told NBC News, as to why Mr. Favre would get the benefit of millions of dollars in the TANF welfare money, both for a fee for speeches he didn't make, $2 million plus to go to a company in which he was the largest outside individual investor, and $5 million for his alma mater to play volleyball in a volleyball building. The state auditor said he found other no-show contracts benefiting former pro athletes and members of Davis, the welfare agency director. The auditor said Davis directed one contract to Austin Smith, his nephew, who was paid more than $400,000 to provide coding skills classes, even though prosecutors allege he had no such skills and did not know how to teach. At least $3 million went to Ted DiBiase. Okay, now I know who Ted DiBiase is. 'Cause I was wondering, who is this pro wrestling athlete that they keep talking about? So now that we have a name attached to it, and Ted is a PC man, much like Brett Favre as well. A retired professional wrestler, Marcus Dupree, a former college football star, also received $370,000 in welfare funds, which prosecutors say partly went to fund his horse ranch. So now we are connecting all the dots. We have Brett Favre, the former athlete, Ted DiBiase, the former pro wrestler, this Marcus Dupree, who owns this horse ranch, who also was a former athlete, and this volleyball complex, which apparently is also ran and owned by Brett Favre, where his daughter plays at. So now we have, I feel like we're connecting all the dots right now. Paul Lacoste, who is the current governor's athletic trainer, was paid $300,000 in welfare funds to run a fitness boot camp for legislators. Look at where all this money is going. Keep in mind, again, at the beginning of the video, they said that Mississippi is the poorest state in the nation, yet you would not know that by the way they're doling out all this money. And this is 6 figures and higher to all these people and these organizations that don't really need it. Yet the people, the regular average citizens who need it, are suffering. Again, and like I said about Jackson, Mississippi, where that has a huge black population, are suffering the most because they done inserted something into their water supply. Much like, again, Flint, Michigan. So when people be asking where's the money at, well, here it is, where it's at. DiBiase, Dupree, Lacoste, and Smith didn't immediately respond to requests for comment. The scandal has also spotlighted the meager scope of Mississippi's welfare program and provided a stark reminder of the Clinton-era welfare reform that provided cities with block grants and wide latitude in how they spend them. According to state figures, Mississippi rejects more than 90% of those who apply for the federal welfare benefit known as Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF. Now look at that. They rejected 90% of families who need it. I would like to know who are the 10% of the families that do receive it, because we clearly know who has been benefiting from it. Those who don't need it. This year, 2,500 children received benefits, state officials said, in a state with 192,000 poor children. Well, the reason why those other 192,000 children didn't get it is because they were sending the money to Brett Favre, Ted DiBiase, that football player, that volleyball complex, and all these other government officials who didn't need the money. That's why the 192,000 other poor kids didn't get it. One of those who had trouble getting help was Tamara Edwards, who raised 4 children on her own while working a series of low-wage jobs. She once received welfare vouchers for child care, and in 2009, she applied again. She said even though her income was low enough, she was denied. They told me they didn't have the funds, said Edwards, who now works as a cook at the Cracker Barrel restaurant. Advocates and state legislators say Mississippi's welfare agency, under years of conservative Republican state governments, has a history of questionable spending and a lack of transparency. TANF has been a slush fund for a long time, said Oleta Fitzgerald, who is the director of the Children's Defense Fund Southern Regional Office and is based in Jackson, the state capital. Again, Jackson, which I mentioned about that water situation. Mississippi is the poorest doggone state in the country. Where is the money and what are they doing with it? And there is nobody on welfare. Welfare participation rates are way down, and no one knows where that money is being spent. Very interesting. She said welfare participation is low. It's not high. It's not in high demand. So the money that's supposed to be given out to people that's supposed to is not getting it. Then they're asking, where is it going? Ding, 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 ding. Look on your screen. Listen to all the people I mentioned. That's where it's going. That is where they're sending the money. They get denied all they want, but let's be real here. A paper trail is going to paper trail. Aisha Nyandaro, the chief executive of Springboard to Opportunities, a local nonprofit group that works with residents of affordable housing, said, and DHS, the state of Department of Human Services, will tell you that the reason they cannot go about allocating the TANF funds is because they can't find any families who are eligible. Go outside and throw a rock. It's Mississippi. You can find an eligible family. Jarvis Dortch, a former state legislator who heads the state's chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, said that when he was a member of the legislature, I could not get a list of how the money was being spent. Dortch said he had to resort to secrecy. Someone had snuck me a list. It didn't have a DHS logo on it. They had it printed out and snuck it out. White, the auditor, told NBC News the investigation goes on. My office is continuing the work. We started over 2 years ago on what is now the largest public fraud case in our state's history, he said. We will also continue to work with our state and federal partners to be sure each person responsible for this massive scheme is held fully accountable under the law. Wow. That was a lot of information right there. And it's messed up at the same time. And quiet as it's kept, this isn't just a Mississippi thing. This is a nationwide thing. It's just that it's honed in on Mississippi because of who's attached to it. Mississippi being the poorest state in America, which I didn't know, I know now. And I can see why. It's getting directed to the people that don't need it. And it's crazy. Like I said, when it comes to these welfare cases, a lot of the people that are involved with it who are collecting, or I should say stealing welfare, are those who look like Brett Favre. I've done several stories in the past about in the upper Northeast, like in the New Jersey area, how a lot of the welfare fraud, and I'm talking about stealing millions, like tens of millions of dollars from the people who need it, look like him, and they are in the quote unquote J-ish community that do it. Like, look at welfare fraud and look at the mugshots that are attached to it. Most of them are going to be PC. Not saying every last one of them, but the vast majority of them are going to be PC. And then they got the nerve to wag their finger at black people and say, if you just get off your butt and pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get a job and do this and do that. Meanwhile, many of them are in a position where they are having to have made it or doing well and are money from those who actually need it the most. They got a lot of nerve, a whole lot of nerve, as Harvey would say. But I'm not shocked or surprised about this revelation. Again, I talked about Brett Favre a few years ago, and it was on the same subject. But at that point, it was like kind of just getting into the investigation itself. It was still kind of fresh. Now this is pretty much a massive update, because here I am thinking it's only going to talk about Brett Favre, but it really got deep into it, that it started to talk about not only him, but Ted DiBiase, a volleyball sports complex, a person who, a former college athlete who owns a horse ranch, and all these corrupt politicians that are involved with it too. And all the people that applied for it can't even get it. And I bet you they didn't have to apply for it. They just gave it to them. I bet you if you pulled up Brett Favre's net worth right now, it's way more than he has received with those welfare funds that he should have not received. He is not hurting for anything if he invested his money properly, of course, because he's been retired for a few years now. But I think he's lying when he says he didn't know that that was welfare funds that he was receiving. My thing is, why wouldn't you do any research to find out where that money came from? It's funny he says that, but he didn't question where the money came from. He just took it. He saw them dollar signs and just ran with it. I'm almost certain that if that thing was monopoly money, he probably would have took that too. So no, I do not believe Brett Favre didn't know where that money came from. I truly believe he knows, or he knew, that that money was welfare funds. And all he had to do was say, no, I cannot accept this. But he didn't. He took the money anyway, just like everybody else. And all the people that apply for it, 90% apply for it, and they did not get approved. And the thing is, they actually fit the criteria to be approved, because they fell into a certain tax bracket. Brett Favre and all the people that stole this money, as far as I'm concerned, they stole it. They are way beyond the tax bracket to even be approved, let alone look at the application to apply for it. But the reason why they're keeping it so hush hush is because, one, is mainly PC that are involved with this. And two, they're trying not to smudge up Brett Favre's name. They want to keep it at a level of, we don't want this to be his legacy. We want his legacy just to be with him being this great football player that, in my opinion, didn't know how to retire. Because remember, Brett Favre wanted to stay in the league for longer than he should have been. We was like, Brett Favre just retired and he came back and retired again. Tom Brady is kind of doing the same thing now. He needs to just sit down somewhere. I don't know what else you're chasing. You already got all your rings, and you chased, you broke so many records already. Just retire. It's over. It's done. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead now and end the video on that note. Y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you are new. So also to have that bell clicked so you can be notified whenever I upload a new video or go live. If by any chance the bell does not work, I upload my videos in a Premiere format, and you can click the notification button, and that'll either be on the bottom left or bottom right of the thumbnail, and the notification should come to your phone. All the links will be down in the description. I will talk to you in the next one.